I don't think it's any surprise that one of my favorite kind of games are licensed games, and one of my favorite consoles is the Sega Genesis. So I am going to be playing on my brand new Sega Nomad some fantastic Sega Genesis licensed games. Let's take a look. Oh yeah. I think one of the unsung heroes of the Warner Brothers kind of arsenal of IP in the video game world is Tiny Toon Adventures, and Tiny Toon Adventures Buster's Hidden Treasures is really solid. Now, this is a late-breaking one. I just discovered this recently. I got it in a Video Games Monthly, and I'll be honest with you, this has turned into one of my favorite platforming adventures on the Genesis. You play as Buster, and you're on a mission to rescue Babs from Montana Max. And you go through a series of fantastic levels with great gameplay, amazing animations, and you just have a great time. Like, it's kind of cookie cutter in that regard, that you would expect it to be a really fun platforming adventure. And you know what? Konami nailed it, because it's a really, really fun platforming adventure. On each level, you need to find Go-Go Dodo. He's going to take you into a portal that takes you off to Wacky Land in the form of a bonus level, so kind of like going through the giant ring at the end of a Sonic level, and it's really good. I thoroughly enjoy this one. It feels a little bit Sonic because the locomotion of the game kind of increases the faster you move and the longer you move, and I really appreciate that they made something kind of magical here. I really enjoy this one. This is a fantastic example of what Konami was able to do with both the Genesis hardware and a license that they cared about. I love Crewball. This was a regular rental for me when I was a kid. And this is a video pinball game starring Motley Crue. It's amazing. This was developed by NewFX, published via Electronic Arts, and it's just a ridiculous game. Like, it just works. You get these awesome 16-bit chiptune versions of Dr. Feelgood, Livewire, and Home Sweet Home, and I mean, that's kind of where anything Motley Crue ends. Like, it's just a fun title. Is it a perfect use of a license? I mean, kind of. It really is, because there's been so many regular pinball tables designed after bands. Like, there's a Beatles one right now that's amazing, that this kind of blazed a trail. I really love this one. This is a super fun title. I really think this is one of the better examples of video pinball on the Sega Genesis, and definitely worth checking out, and a perfect use of the Motley Crue license. He's heating up! Boom shakalaka! I love NBA Jam. I really do. I do tend to put a sports title on every one of these licensed game lists, just because I think people overlook the fact that these are all licensed games, and there's so many fantastic licensed sports titles out there, but I think the best of the bunch on the Genesis that strays away from just straight-up simulation is easily NBA Jam, or NBA Jam Tournament Edition. Both are wonderful. If you have never played it, it is 2-on-2 basketball, it is over the top, it is ridiculous, it's amazing. It's just one of my favorite games to play on the Genesis, or in arcades, or on the Super Nintendo. I just love the title. The game is over the top. You get to do these just ridiculous dunks that launch you across the screen and hugely high up into the air. You get to shatter backboards, and it features some of the best players of the 1990s from the NBA, minus Shaquille O'Neal and Michael Jordan. But it's a wonderful game. There are plenty of games based on obscure properties out there, but one of my absolute favorites is the Pirates of Dark Water. This was a holy grail game for me for decades. I owned this and sold it when I was younger, and had always been on a pursuit to find it again, but eventually it got to be too expensive, and then I just didn't find it anywhere. And recently at my local game store here in Kalamazoo, Second Chance, I was able to score a complete in-box copy of the game. And I'm so happy to have it back in my collection. Now, I don't necessarily think this is a landmark platformer by any stretch of the imaginations. I actually think it's pretty straightforward, pretty standard stuff, but when I consider how much I enjoyed the Pirates of Dark Water cartoon when I was younger, I really think this kind of captures that magic. And it's a pretty solid platformer to boot. Like, it's a fun platforming beat 'em up, and I think it really does a service to the license. I enjoy this game immensely, and this could very well be nostalgia goggles just kind of clouding my vision of it, even though I go back to it regularly and have played it now on the physical cart as well as an emulation in the past, and I've enjoyed it every single time. And I just love it. I really think this is something where publishers need to look at more properties like Pirates of Dark Water, like Bucky O'Hare on the NES, that are a little bit more obscure, and maybe not as well known as something like Batman. And take a chance on it, because sometimes you can create something really magical. I'm not sure there's been a better developer for the characters of Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck than Sega. And World of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck is legitimately one of my favorite games on the Genesis, flat out. Doesn't matter if it's licensed or not. I just adore this title. This is a platformer game. You can play solo or co-op with 2 players controlling Mickey and Donald at the same time. You can run, jump, or attack. You can use magic by flashing your cape at guys, I guess, and turning them into something else. And it's legitimately just one of my favorite experiences because it feels like a Disney cartoon come to life. And honestly, when you're playing a game like this, featuring Mickey and Donald, what you want is something that feels like that property, and this does that. There have been plenty of other games starring characters like this that just don't quite land. Like, when I think of games like Tailspin on the NES, while it definitely features Baloo, and you're definitely flying around in Baloo's airplane, it doesn't feel right. This one feels like one of the Mickey and Donald cartoons from the 40s come to life. I absolutely adore this title. There's a whole series of games in the Illusion universe that everyone needs to play. We've actually got a new one coming out on the Switch soon that I'm really looking forward to, but World of Illusion is my number one with a bullet on the Genesis and absolutely one of the best games on the platform. While this is not as a ubiquitous beat-em-up experience as the game it was ported from for the arcade, I actually really enjoy the Genesis version of The Punisher. I think, despite the system's limitations and removal of some of the kind of key aspects of the arcade version, I think this is a really solid port. And what a perfect character, or 2 characters, to feature as your protagonists in a beat-em-up from the Marvel Universe. The Punisher and Nick Fury are kind of tailor-made for it. Outside of Spider-Man and Wolverine, I can't really think of a better character from Marvel off the top of my head, although I guess Captain America and the Avengers would work too, but I really enjoy this one though. I do think the beat-em-up aspects of the game are really solid. You're able to actually use your handgun when other enemies have guns on the screen. There is some content censorship and things like that, so there are drawbacks to this one versus its arcade original, but I do still think it's a fun title, and I think it actually lands pretty well. I do think it's a solid beat-em-up experience. It might not be a perfect game, and I think that's kind of true of most licensed titles, but I do think this one's really fun. Aladdin holds a spot for being not only one of my all-time favorite video games on the Sega Genesis, but also the first Disney feature animation film I really remember seeing in theaters. I'm pretty sure I saw Bambi at one point, but the less said about that movie, the better. The video game for Aladdin is kind of miraculous. The animations in the game are some of the best ever in a 16-bit video game. It's ungodly how good it looks. The gameplay is spectacular. It's a fun action platformer, leans heavily into the source material, but still blazes its own trail by not being completely beholden to level designs or anything like that, by being directly from the film. So you'll have familiar enemies, you'll have familiar situations and things like that, but it's not going to be a one-to-one correlation for what you experienced with the film Aladdin. Instead, you get to go on this really fun adventure playing as Aladdin, or Prince Ali, fabulous he, Ali of Babwa. It's just a wonderful title. It's something where you look at what Virgin Interactive did with this property and just made something unbelievably miraculous. Fantastic game. I suggest everyone plays this one. And if you prefer the Super Nintendo version, by all means, play that one. I just happen to like the Genesis version a little bit more. As a lifelong comic book fan, nothing got my attention more in the early 90s outside of the Infinity Gauntlet than the death and return of Superman. The 90s was kind of the touchstone era of event comics. Now, we had things like Atlantis Attacks from Marvel or the Crisis on Infinite Earths from DC in the 80s, but the 90s kind of launched that never-ending cycle of event comics happening almost every year. And the death and return of Superman story was something that just captivated the world. And the video game we got from it, which was developed by Blizzard, was an excellent beat-em-up. You got to start the game as Superman, and eventually you controlled Cyborg Superman, Eradicator, Steel, and Superboy, and you went through a stylized version of the entire story arc. And I'm not going to lie to you, despite the fact that this thing did not get great reviews upon release, it's something I've enjoyed for now almost 30 years. I really think this is a great example of what a superhero beat-em-up could be. Now, Does it play fast and loose with who the character of Superman is and some of the powers? Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like, he's probably not the best example of a character to use in a beat-em-up game, but I mean, small sacrifice to make. It's still a really fun title. I suggest anyone play this one because I do think it's a wonderful game. So if you have not taken the time out of your day to try it, definitely do so. I'm not huge on light gun games, so for something like T2, the arcade game, to really kind of capture my imagination and be something that I've played pretty frequently in my life, it has to be really special. And I'm really thankful, actually, that this has not only Menacer support on the Genesis, but also controller support, because I don't know CRT to play it anymore. And it's nice to be able to just control it with a controller. This is an on-rails shooter. It's a kind of a side-to-side scrolling one. It's kind of like Revolution X or anything like that, where you're going to be shooting at Terminators as they come on screen, and it's a really fun experience. This isn't any kind of groundbreaking game or anything like that. The Genesis version is actually a really descaled version of the arcade experience, but it's faithful enough that I still have a ton of fun with it. Would I prefer the arcade version over this one? Absolutely, but this is going to do in a pinch, and I actually think it's a really fun game. Despite the fact that so many of you have told you how wrong I am because I prefer the Hyperstone Heist over Turtles in Time on the Super Nintendo, I'm featuring it here because this is my favorite Turtles game, outside of Shredder's Revenge. This is legitimately my favorite Turtles beat-em-up. I think this one just moves a little bit better than Turtles in Time. I think the animations are a little bit crisper. I like the levels more in this game. I just think it's a more fluid title than what I experienced in Turtles in Time. And I know this one is based off of that framework, but I don't care. This one just works for me. And it might have something to do with the fact that I played this one first versus Turtles in Time, but I don't know. I just like this one. If you haven't played it, this is one of the best Ninja Turtles beat-em-ups out there. In a long line of fantastic beat-em-ups, this one just kind of works for me. You get to play as Leonardo, Donatello, Michelangelo, or Raphael. The levels are longer than what you experience in Turtles in Time, although there is less variety. But the enemy AI is more difficult in Hyperstone Heist than it is in Turtles in Time, and that's the experience I'm looking for. It gave me more. I love this game. I think everyone should play it. All right, everybody, there you have it. Everything from a murderous vigilante with a skull on his shirt to an adorable bunny trying to rescue his other adorable bunny girlfriend. We've got NBA players launching themselves through the skies to pirates adventuring through dark waters on a quest for glory. This is a great example of some fantastic licensed games on the Sega Genesis. Let me know in the comments down below some of your favorites. There are definitely some games conspicuous by their absence, and I would love to hear the ones that you suggest for me to try out. Until next time, folks, I've been Jay. Appreciate you spending a little bit of time with me. Remember to play more games, stay square, and take care. I'll talk to you soon.